Welcome to the Why Did I Get Cancer podcast. I'm Deborah Herlax-Enos, a small town girl turned TV nutritionist and healthy living expert. I design health programs for the average guy or gal, including those average guys named Metallica. On September 1st, 2020, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I asked every oncologist the same question, why did I get cancer? But none of my doctors had good answers for me. I wanted answers, and that's why I started this podcast. I want to help you to lower your cancer risk and provide self-care tips for those in the battle. I'm getting answers, and I want to share them with you. Today's topic was one, I'll be honest, I kind of just want to stick my head in the sand, but it's about pediatric cancer. I interviewed a woman, her name is Susan Johnson. She is a functional nutritional therapy practitioner with a specialty of helping families whose children have been diagnosed with cancer. She's also a cancer mama, as her youngest was diagnosed with cancer many years ago and is now thriving. So I asked Susan, I said, so are pediatric cancers on the rise? And she said they are significantly on the rise. And she really felt that the environment our kids are living in was one of the biggest culprits. And she told me that 95 to 97% of most cancers are environmentally derived. So she was saying what you're feeding your kids, the electromagnetic fields and EMFs that they're around, to not being outside as often as they used to be, 20 or 30 years ago. So we also talked about how to help your kids to thrive and not get cancer in the first place. And one of the things she was saying is that there are simple things that parents can do to make it so you create an environment in your child where cancer can't thrive and survive. One of those things that she talked about was getting your child outside in the morning. They're exposed to the morning sunlight, their feet are on the ground, and it's just an amazing way to reset your body, reset your circadian rhythm, and in general, increase their health. She's got so many tips. She was just a wealth of information. I hope you enjoy this podcast as much as I did. Enjoy. Well, Susan Johnson, welcome to Why Did I Get Cancer? I found you on Instagram, as I find many of my guests, and you are a functional nutritional therapy practitioner. You work with pediatric cancer patients, and your son was also diagnosed, I'm not sure at what age, with cancer. We got a lot to unpack. Really looking forward to this conversation, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be here. I love sharing our story and just giving other families hope in the midst of a cancer diagnosis.
And hope is so important, because when you hear the C word, it's one thing for me to hear it as an adult.
Yeah.
And I have the words and I have the emotions and I have those things. But for a child to hear cancer and the heartbreak of the parents, a couple questions. Can tell us more about your journey. And the follow-up question is, you now work with moms and dads and children. That has got to be an amazing way to turn your heartbreak into a blessing for these families.
Yeah, it is. And my heart doesn't stop breaking. I think that's the hardest part of this job. I was joking with my assistant earlier that in heaven, I think that her and I are going to be able to sell flowers and chocolate and just being able to have this job where it's just full of joy.
I love that.
From having one child with cancer to thousands around the world. And when my son was diagnosed, I was a private practitioner. So I was already in practice, and I wouldn't touch cancer with a 10-foot pole. It was terrifying to me. I was unfamiliar with it. Right. And so when we received this diagnosis, my son's almost 3 years old, and we're told that he has acute lymphoblastic leukemia. And the next words we were told were, "Don't worry, that's the good cancer." And at the time, as a parent, like you said, I wanted to punch the oncologist. Like, what is that? And yes, in looking back and now what I know, 10 years into this journey of being in the pediatric cancer world, leukemia is very treatable.
Okay.
In fact, leukemia is a cancer that I would recommend chemotherapy for, even if you did have an option, because it can be effective with leukemia. And so we're diagnosed, and immediately we leave the conference room. This was a big wake up moment for us. We leave the conference room where we're told the conventional protocol It was going to be 3.5 years, chemotherapy every single day, antibiotics every single week, steroids off and on, doing steroid pulses, chemotherapy injected into the spinal fluid, and just this whole protocol. And, my son at this point had never been to a normal doctor. We've always seen an osteopath, chiropractor, naturopath. We just
Right.
never saw the need for conventional care. And we left that conference room and we walked into our hospital room and immediately got on a Zoom call with our alternative team. And as a practitioner, and you can understand this, I had colleagues that were smarter than me and really experts in supporting the body. And so I reached out to them and we got on a Zoom call and my question to them was, okay, so you give us your protocol and then we're going to choose. And they kept stumbling over their words and they weren't getting really direct. And finally, I'm like, what? I don't understand. Why are you hesitant? And they both actually just said, Season, you can't leave the hospital. They will arrest you and your husband and your child will become property of the state. So while we will give you a protocol and we'll help support him alongside the conventional treatment, you don't have a choice. This is the protocol you have to follow. And I just talk about having the wind taken out from your sails. You already feel powerless.
Right.
And then to be told like you don't have a choice. And I wasn't smart enough to know what choice to make, right?
Yeah.
That would be a terrifying decision. And so from that moment on, we realized, oh my gosh, we are going to watch his body be pumped full of cytotoxic poison and go through surgeries. And how do we keep him healthy? And so that's when we stepped into just implementing a lot of different natural remedies and protocols alongside our oncology team.
So you're able to mix a more holistic approach with the typical Western medicine, because if you didn't participate in the Western medicine, you would be arrested.
Yeah.
Okay.
We would, in some families, there are situations if a child is put on hospice, then oftentimes the oncology team will agree to let them try other options.
Yeah.
It's just devastating that it has to get to that
No
point.
kidding.
But yeah, we didn't have a choice.
I can't imagine just how lost. I mean, I would have felt lost. I don't know. I don't want to put emotions and words in your mouth, but also just to see your child have to go through so much.
Yeah.
How did you sleep?
You don't sleep a lot. You don't eat a lot in the beginning.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's kind of like I just would lay with him. He was little and I'd sleep in his hospital bed with him for that first month that we were inpatient. And, the buzzards and the beeping and the constant checks. And I just kept when I would fall asleep, waking up and being like, God, please let me wake up. And this is a nightmare. Like, this isn't reality. And that didn't happen. And so it was a choice I had to make. Like, am I going to let this define me?
Yeah.
And am I going to cross my arms and sit back and be a victim
Right.
to our circumstance? Or am I going to step up and realize I do have a role to play here and I'm not going to be passive?
Good for you.
And yeah.
That's really inspiring. I know that will be inspiring to people listening today, that you chose a different path and you just decided to change your mindset and realize you had a job to do. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that the problem with especially a pediatric cancer journey is, this is the same for an adult cancer journey, is there's so much fear.
So much
And
fear.
most of us, if we knew of somebody with cancer, and I think you mentioned you had a childhood friend that had cancer, but usually when you have known somebody, it's either an old person or they died.
Right.
That was our story.
Right. Yeah. Same.
And so there's so much fear around it. And so you're completely like flattened and devastated by the news. And then you're filled with fear. And so the typical response is to do whatever the doctor says.
Of course.
And to just be tunnel vision they know what they're doing, and they do, but they only know what they're doing through pharmacology. They don't know anything outside of that.
Yeah.
And so, yes, you need to follow their instructions, but then you need a team outside of pharmacology that specializes in nutrition and detox and all of that to come alongside you. So being passive is not an option. You can't.
It is not an option. It is not an option. And I agree. There is a holistic approach and a combination that should be available because chemo, it's so grateful I didn't have to do it, but it is such a load on the body. And what do
Yeah.
you do after chemo? On your podcast, you talked, I think there was an episode I listened to a couple of weeks ago, and I'll tag it in the show notes about your favorite detox foods. So I
Yeah.
definitely want to talk about that. But first I want to ask you a question about pediatric cancers. It seems like just from things that I read and maybe I'm headline educated, which I don't love. But are pediatric cancers on the rise?
Significantly.
Really?
I just had the opportunity to meet with an oncology team at a Florida hospital who is open to letting us start educating their families.
Mm.
I have a program. It's called Thrive Through Cancer Formula, and I coach pediatric cancer families very closely through their diagnosis. And all of a sudden, these kids that we're working with are doing so well
Really?
that their oncology team is now becoming, not always, but more open
Mm.
to hearing, like, what are you doing? And now that's leading to meetings with the oncology teams,
Oh,
and which is a huge blessing. And we're praying that this continues. But I just met with an oncology team in Florida, and they don't have room on their pediatric oncology floor anymore. It is overfilling into other floors of the hospital, and it's devastating. And
heartbreaking.
it's heartbreaking.
And is there, I mean, in your research, are there, you know, indicators as to why pediatric cancers have risen so much?
Yeah, I think when we understand that most cancer, and this goes for adult and pediatric, it's between 95 and 97% environmental.
Mm.
And only a few cancers are actually genetic.
Hmm.
Now, genetics play a role in environmental, right? And
Right.
our genetics are what allow us to either have a bigger funnel to drain toxins or a smaller
Mm.
funnel. But we know through the study of epigenetics that we can turn on and off our genes to thrive or to avoid cancer. But all that said, it is an environmental crisis. We have more environmental toxins, and not just the toxins that we see and smell, but EMF exposure. You have kids that are as little as 6 on iPhones and iPads,
Yep.
and that I saw a kid mowing the lawn the other day. He couldn't have been more than 10 wearing the wireless
Yeah.
earbuds. So we have this insane exposure to toxins in our
Insane
environment.
exposure. Yes.
Foods, we have these Franken foods that are being marketed to kids. We have energy drinks. We have kids since the pandemic were locked up and got really kind of comfortable being sedentary and comfortable on screens
Mhm.
and fearful,
Yep.
like, fearful of germs. And so now we're over sanitized. So yeah, I believe it is absolutely an environmental crisis.
Wow. And then I would imagine, kids are not outside as much as they used to. I think about how I grew up, and I grew up on a little farm orchard in Northern California, and we were outside practically more than we were inside. And there's so much
Yeah.
healing that can come from being out in nature, running around barefoot, and just playing and having more joy. And I'm assuming a lot of kids don't get that opportunity like I did growing up.
Yeah, and that is devastating. Like, there are some simple things that parents could do right now that are free, that would actually create an environment cancer can't survive in their kids, and it's getting their children morning light exposure.
Oh, okay.
So, like, just when their kid wakes up,
Mhm.
and sometimes kids wake up before the sun, right? But as soon as the sun comes out, the family goes outside and they get morning light exposure barefoot on the ground,
Okay.
have this exposure to earth, which
Mhm.
is incredibly energetic and healing. And you have the morning light. So the other thing too that we talk about is eating meals outside
Oh.
in the
Oh,
sunshine.
tell me about that. I mean, I live in we
There's
talked about earlier, I live in Seattle. It's almost July. It is dumping rain. It's, 58 degrees, and so I'm not gonna be eating outside today, but whenever it is nice, and if I travel someplace and it's nice, I always wanna be outside. That's just my inner spirit telling me to get outside. So you're saying that that is helpful.
yes,
Okay.
there are so many studies and so much evidence-based research behind sunlight and
Okay.
outdoor fresh air.
Mhm.
I mean, we're basically like we use the sun to charge our body. Like the
Oh.
sun can actually help charge. And this is why you experience seasonal depression in certain areas of the world,
Mhm.
right? Where there is less sunshine. And there was a study done, and I will have to try to find it. But we live in Mexico now, and there was a study done. Mexicans, by the way, in the region that we are in, it's not necessarily now because of the infiltration of really junk food from America.
Mhm.
They're not known to be the healthiest as far as nutrition. Okay. However, there is less incidence of disease, even though they may not be as educated in certain parts of Mexico
Mhm.
and they're eating junk food, but they are outside and they're in the sunshine and they're working hard with their bodies. And this can't be a blanket statement for all of Mexico, but in our region,
Yeah.
this is what we see. And so it's really fascinating that sunlight and outdoor fresh air is incredibly healing.
And they're free.
Yes. No. Yeah. Like, thanks, God. Appreciate this.
Yeah.
Super bonus. Yeah,
Right.
it's free.
So it's free. So getting your kids outside first thing in the morning, playing with them outside. One of the things that I do is I make my cup of coffee and then I walk around my yard and I
Yeah.
look toward the sun, not at the sun, right? So toward the direction of the sun. I look at flowers. I pray. I think about my day. All those things, and I feel so much better, more
Yeah.
energized, and just more clarity of thought. Is that can we
Yes.
back that up with science?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, you absolutely can. I
Okay.
mean, literally get out of bed and look up sunshine or sunlight, healing benefits. And listen, like this is where just kind of the red tape of I joke that, we live in Mexico and everybody says, "Oh, is it safe there? You've got the cartel and blah, blah, blah."
Mhm.
And I'm like, well, in America, you've got a real big cartel that controls the entire country, and it's our medical
Yep.
industry.
Yep.
And when we think of that, we realize that it's so heavily controlled. You're not going to find nearly as many studies
Mhm.
done on sunlight
Yeah.
because there's no money in that.
There's no
They're
money
not
in
they
it.
can't bottle that up and sell it to you,
Yeah,
right?
there you can't patent that.
You'll
So,
No, but you'll still find some, and it is fascinating, and you're right. Because I think what most people do, Deborah, is they start their day looking at a
oh, I
screen.
know. I know. You're absolutely right. Yeah. Yeah. And I would imagine seeing that type of light first thing in the morning, does that do anything to your body or
Yeah, it actually teaches your body to step into the process of healing that's natural. It's called your circadian rhythm.
okay.
So when you start the day with morning light,
Mhm.
you are sending a signal to your brain to activate the circadian rhythm.
Okay.
And so it's kind of like our ancestors rose with the sun and went down with the
That's
sun.
true.
And so it was their body knew what time. So during your circadian rhythm process, there is a time for digestion,
Mhm.
a time for detox, a time for restoration. And by starting looking at the day or looking at the sun, looking toward the sun, getting that exposure, you're starting your circadian rhythm on the right
Hmm.
track so that your body does what God intended it to do when He created it.
Wow.
And so you're just helping activate your natural healing system in the body.
Okay. And this is one of the top things you would have parents do with their children. You said, and maybe you can requote it to make their body impervious to cancer. Maybe
Well,
restate.
I would say just to activate their system
Mhm.
to create an environment that cancer can't survive in.
Okay.
And of course, are there other things to do? Oh my gosh, yes. And nutrition and detox and there's supplements. But what I find, and you would probably relate to this as a mom, kids are inherently picky.
Mhm.
They're inherently stubborn, and that's okay. They want their autonomy. They're learning to
Yep.
work within boundaries. But then when you put a kid through the trauma of cancer and the chemotherapy that changes their taste buds,
Oh.
if I start with a mom and I say the first advice I'm going to give you is give them bone broth, sauerkraut, and organ meats, they're going to laugh.
Yeah.
They're like, "Are you kidding me? Like, what world do you live in?"
Yep.
because that's not going to go over well. So what do we first need to do? We first need to give them something that they can accomplish and have a win, and something that allows the child to actually start, like you experienced, to start feeling better. Because when they feel better, they're going to be more open to some of the other natural remedies and the nutrition.
That is so true. Yes, some of these suggestions are going to be tough. I mean, organ meats, yes,
Yeah.
but if you do it in smaller doses, so like let's start with sunshine and then maybe we go to sauerkraut, which I think there's lots of fermented foods that can probably do similar work in your body.
Yeah.
And I love Sally Fallon Morell from the Weston A. Price Foundation. She talks about 2 tablespoons of fermented food has the probiotic power of an entire bottle of probiotics. So I always have fermented foods in my refrigerator. And last night I had a sweet potato for dinner. It's been great. My husband's been out of town, so I haven't been cooking. So my big cook was, made a baked a sweet potato, and then I put some really amazing butter on it, grass-fed butter, and then fermented some kimchi, some spicy kimchi, and it was
Yeah.
amazing. It was
I
amazing.
love that.
So simple, like just small doses of
Yeah.
these foods. Okay.
Yeah. And that's the thing, and it takes a while to develop a palate for fermented foods, but pickles, most kids are
Right.
not going to turn their nose up to pickles,
Right.
right? And you can pickle any vegetable. If a kid loves the carrot, pickle a carrot,
Yep.
and fermented foods are really, really powerful. And a lot of pediatric oncologists tell their patients they don't want them doing any supplements, anything natural.
Yeah.
And I work with a functional medicine doctor in my program to help the parents feel even more support from a medical doctor perspective in what we suggest. But they'll often say, the oncology team will say, don't do probiotics. And while I disagree with that, it's truly it ends up being up to the parent. And I always say, use your intuition. And if you don't feel comfortable giving them a probiotic, give them fermented food at every meal.
Oh, that's such a great swap. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And we also
inexpensive.
right. It's inexpensive, and sometimes it's just hard. I get pill fatigue. I get supplement fatigue. So of course kids are also, but if you put a little, pickled carrot on top of, a sweet potato or on top of a taco, which is how I normally do it, it's amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. In fact, that's one that a family in my program was saying that their child is really picky. So we've gotten them to eat taco bowls and we mix organ meats in. They don't even know. And they love pickled carrots.
Yeah.
And so they'll shred pickled carrots into the taco bowl and the kid doesn't
And
even
nobody's
notice.
the wiser, right? I love that. Okay, so you're talking about some of the other things. You've got the sunshine, you've got more activity. Are there other suggestions you make to parents to protect their kids?
Yeah. So and these are really simple tips because again, we want to make sure we meet them where they're at.
Right.
And give them something that they can feel is a win. Because if you try something and it's just an immediate fail, as a parent, it's so disheartening and you just feel like a failure. You already are questioning yourself and you're carrying guilt when you have a child with cancer. And so I want to set them up for wins. Another thing that's actually really great, and it kind of comes back to what you were saying in play, is rebounding on a trampoline.
What?
In fact, I was out with my nephew yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah. So invest in a trampoline. Your kids are going to think you're the best mom or dad ever.
Yep.
And encourage them to jump. That stimulates the lymphatic system, which is your blood detox system. And it will help dump and push the dead tumor waste and the residual cytotoxic poison that their bodies are being pumped full of. It'll help flush it out. And it's fun and it's playful. And it's actually something kind of to your point you mentioned earlier too, of like being playful with your kids. Like you can do it with your kids and get, and they're not going to always feel good enough to do that. Right. But when they do, it's so helpful.
That's fascinating. I hadn't thought about that before, but I'd written an article about the lymphatic system for the Costco Connection. And one of my interviews was with a physician, researcher, and he was saying those rebounders, like the little mini ones, rebounder for one is phenomenal for lymphatic flow. So wow. So I guess, go big or go home, just get the trampoline for your kids. Okay.
Yeah.
And they're outside
Exactly.
in the sunshine, unless they live in
Yeah.
Seattle. Yes. So
Right.
that's great.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
I have to tell you, I just love your podcast. And I'd mentioned earlier that I loved your episode about the detox foods because at its core, it was really simple. And it's an area I focus on because I struggled post-cancer with my detox, opening up what is very vogue to say these days, opening up my detox pathways, but I struggled. And it sounds like you might be saying that could be like a genetic thing that my detox pathways are just kind of shut down and I had to really work with a physician to get them going.
Yeah, it is. You're right. I think so. Your genetics could position you to have certain SNPs where you don't detox as effectively. And actually, one of the things that we find, and you've probably seen this as well, we've found common in cancer diagnosis is these SNPs are all in common. And you're not, when you get a diagnosis of cancer, because we're creating cancer cells every single
Right.
day, all of
Yep.
us. But the difference between it turning into a tumor or tumors and not is our immune system firing and our genetic predispositions. And again, I want to preface this with these SNPs that we're talking about 99% of the time can be turned off or turned on
Okay.
based on our nutrition, our detox, like all of the things that we're trying to do to create an environment
Right.
that's healthy.
Right.
So when we think of genetics that don't, predispose you to not detoxing well,
Mhm.
yeah, that is a big issue. And so trying to open up those detox pathways and some of the first things that we talk about, of course, hydration,
Mhm.
right? Making sure you're really hydrated. You're drinking filtered water, half of your body weight in ounces a day. Making sure, before you go into any type of a detox that you're having a bowel movement at least one time a day.
Mhm.
Making sure you can sweat.
Mm.
And so we put kids in sauna. We tell them to find a sauna. One of our families today on our call was telling us that her gym in her little hometown lets her 2-year-old, who's been fighting cancer since he was actually 3 days old.
Oh gosh.
They let their 2-year-old go into the gym, lets him come in and sit in the sauna. And she said he's so bougie now. He needs his sauna time.
That's
But
really
the
sweet.
beautiful thing about that is it induces sweat because it's not easy to get, like kids aren't working out like we
Right.
would, right? Where we work sweat.
Right.
Putting them in a sauna to induce a sweat is really helpful at opening up detox
Okay.
pathways. And there are times where we're working with a child and they're not breaking a sweat. So we got to pull back and we need to supplement them with specific things and know a little bit more about their biochemical makeup to support that.
Mhm.
But in general, just making sure those are happening before you really step into any type of detox for sure.
Okay. So it sounds like sweating, bowel movements, making sure you're hydrated. These are all key drivers to having a better,
Yes,
more efficient detox system.
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Tell us about some of your favorite detox foods.
Yeah. So, and this is where it starts. People start to go, wait, what?
Mhm.
But I promise I'm going to give you a couple of really creative solutions.
Okay.
One of my favorites is actually organ meats. And I already mentioned it
You
once.
did.
And listen, I will tell you, I am not going to eat liver. I'm just not going to do it.
Okay.
My dad used to cook liver and onions, and it's just not even an
Yep.
option. I will eat a good pate.
Me too.
Sally Fallon in her Nourishing Traditions cookbook has a great
She
recipe.
does. Yep.
So a good pate I'm all about, but just in general, and kids aren't going, like generally a kid is not going to want organ meats or pate.
Yeah. They're
right?
not going to say, Mom, for dinner, I'd love to have liver and onions tonight. Thank you.
And if they do, that is, you have an anomaly of
You
a
sure
child.
do.
So when we think of organ meats, before I kind of share some suggestions of how to get it in, if you're like me or like you and we don't love the taste of it. So it's like for like. In order to support your kidneys and your liver
Mm.
and your pancreas and your heart, like all organs and systems of the body, the best way to support it and to rebuild and contribute to the integrity of those organs is actually supplementing with them.
Wow. Okay. That is really well said and simple. Okay. if you've been around for any length of time, you know I'm not a fan of EMFs, electromagnetic fields, or frequencies, but I'm a fan of my cell phone. Yes, I use my cell phone way too much. I'm on my iPad way too much. So here's what I'm doing is I'm learning to manage technology because I want to be a really healthy person. I don't want to be around excess radiation. And this is why I'm a big fan of Wave Block. And one of the things I love about Wave Block is they're educators. They're educating people on how to take protective measures to still use technology, but just protect their bodies and their children. I didn't realize this. I was on a Wave Block phone call the other day, and they were telling me that children or kids, the small ones, their skulls absorb 10 times the radiation that an adult fully formed skull will absorb. And that in other countries, like European countries, and I can't remember all of them, but they actually ban Wi-Fi in nurseries and kindergartens. So what a great idea, because the kids' skulls are just not fully formed yet. Okay, so here is what I do to protect myself. First of all, I turn my Wi-Fi router off at night. If you go to the WaveBlock website, which is waveblock.com, they have a whole educational section, and the top EMF emitting devices, cell phones, earbuds, or things like that, and Wi-Fi routers. So I'm trying to manage those. One of the ways I manage the radiation on my listening device is I use the Wave Block tape that goes around the device. It doesn't impact me hearing at all. And what it does, according to the research by Wave Block, it knocks radiation down by 90+%. So if you have a listening device on each ear, where do you think that modem is meeting? The modem is your head. So you want to knock down radiation as much as you possibly can. So go check out WaveBlock. Again, I really encourage you to read some of their education. And if you use the code ENOS10, you'll get 10% off of your purchase. And do your own due diligence, but it's a fascinating topic. Educate yourself, protect your kids, enjoy.
It's so simple. It is so simple. And now it's really important to know you only do this when you're sourcing your organ meats from a healthy, pastured, not, never given antibiotics animal.
Okay.
That's essential. And so when we do this, we're actually helping our liver, our lungs, our pancreas, our heart, everything function better. So a few ways that I love getting families to incorporate it. Now, the least expensive way is when you go into your butcher. I'm a big proponent of saving money on healthy foods. Yep. And one of the best ways to get good meat is to find a ranch and buy a share of a cow, right?
Yep.
Then you're getting a quarter of a cow or a half of a cow, and your price goes down to like $4 a pound for even a fillet or ground beef. Now, if you have this option, you can tell the ranch or the butcher that you actually want the organ meats ground up into the ground beef. And I usually say 80-20. 20% organ meats, 80% normal beef. And in our family, we have 2 teenagers. We do a lot of ground beef. We do burgers, taco bowls, meatballs, things like that. So you do an 80-20 mix, and you just ask the butcher to mix it in. And most of the time you will not be able to even tell it's in there. So that's the least expensive way.
Great tip.
Good. Now, the second option that's very inexpensive, but you've got to be a little bit braver, is to purchase a grass-fed, organic, pasture-raised beef liver. And you're going to get it. You're going to freeze it for 14 days. Okay. You're going to get this raw liver from a clean source, and you're going to freeze it for 14 days, and you're going to pull it out of the freezer. And by the way, this is in the Nourishing Traditions cookbook by Sally Fallon.
Okay.
So you're going to chop up that liver. This is the way I suggest to do it. And I've actually taught this for years, even in private practice. Chop up the liver into small, swallowable size chunks. And then you're going to refreeze it. So you chop it up, and you need a real sharp knife because this liver is frozen.
Okay.
And you can certainly chop it up raw too. There's no right or wrong way. The most important thing is that when you have a raw liver, you freeze it for 14 days before you consume it.
Okay.
So you're going to freeze it and then chop it up into swallowable pills, throw it in a glass Tupperware, put it back in the freezer. And every day you're going to swallow a couple chunks. Kids, can't typically swallow pills. So what we encourage is when they're making their special healthy smoothie,
Hmm.
you throw the chunk or chunks into the smoothie and you won't be able to taste it
Really?
as long as you've added some berries and bananas,
Right.
right? Something to sweeten it.
Right.
So that's another option. But the last option, which is what most of my families that I work with do,
Hmm.
is we have two companies that we love to recommend. One is a supplement, one is a food. So Paleo Valley has Organ Complex, and I can give your listeners a discount code that we have access to. So it's a supplement and it's a complex that is beef, liver, heart, kidney.
Hmm.
And it's a capsule that they can open up and they can actually mix into a meal.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So it does taste, but if you mix it into something seasoned, it's not
Right.
noticeable.
Right. Yeah. Okay. It's like if you put it in, some sort of sauce or a strong, like a soup
Exactly.
or something. Okay. That's it. That seems like a great place to start,
Yes.
because it's a
Because
supplement.
there are a
Yeah.
lot of families are ready to like take on getting the liver. It's all a little
It's
intimidating, right?
right. Right.
So the capsule, if they can swallow capsules, great, swallow the capsule, but a lot of kids can't. So you're going to just get creative with that.
Okay.
There's another company. This company is newer. I just found them at a health conference about 4 months ago. It's called Eat Pluck.
Oh, yes.
Have you-
Yeah. No, he's been on my
Okay.
podcast before. So,
Oh,
yeah.
I love
Yeah,
it.
James Barry. He's awesome. Has so much great information. He used to be the chef for George Clooney and all these Hollywood celebrities. And
Oh, I didn't know
yeah,
that.
and now he has this company, Eat Pluck, and it's basically I call it a healthy version of Lowry's seasoned salt because it's made
Yes.
with organs.
Yes. That's exactly. And like everybody in my family loves
Yeah.
it. We put it on eggs, we put it on popcorn, we
Right.
put it on whatever you're going to use the Lowry's. You can put it on your
You
steak.
you know, you're I need to order more. I ran out. And so you're right. This is a great reminder season. Yeah, because there are, let's just say, like low effort ways to get some of these amazing superfoods, and you're calling organs detox to get these things
Yes.
into our body without, like, there's the harder way, which is the getting the beef liver and freezing it and all of that, or there's like a starter house, like you're starting with
Totally.
supplements, sprinkling them on, and start with that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we've seen kids' liver enzymes come down just by incorporating organ meats into their diet.
Ah,
But it's a really
okay.
effective way to support the body. And it's chemoprotective as well. We're just looking at how can we protect our organs and systems because chemo isn't intentional. It destroys everything. It's a cytotoxic poison. So it goes in
Wow.
and obliterates everything.
Okay.
But there are foods and nutrition that we bring in, such as organ meats,
Hmm.
that actually can protect the body and protect the organs from the damage.
Oh, that's interesting. I was not aware that organ meats were chemoprotective. And can you just define chemoprotective?
I think there's probably a few different ways you could define it, but the way I look at it, and again, I work with families that have a child, and so we want to
Mhm.
keep this at a education level that they can communicate to their 12-year-old or their 4-year-old or their 17-year-old, like this is why we're doing
Yeah.
this. But it's really truly to protect against the cytotoxic poison. And so, for example, we're thinking of liver. Chemo is incredibly destructive to the
I'll
liver.
bet.
The liver is absolutely essential for sex hormones, for your thyroid hormone, for so many aspects of your
Hmm.
body, your healthy cholesterol levels. So in order to protect it against damage, we need to be using foods that actually create integrity
Mm.
of the organ, and that would be like versus like. So taking the organ meat, consuming that to protect it against damage from the chemotherapy.
Interesting. Those are really good tips, Susan. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, and this is for anybody. You don't have to be going through
Oh my
chemo to
gosh.
be sprinkling a little bit of this, organ-based, seasoning salt on your food. It's just a great way to, power boost it, nutrient boost it up.
Well, and that's a great point. Please don't wait until you have cancer
Thank
to
you.
implement these.
Yes. Just, I mean, and
Like,
and again, you're giving us bite size, no pun intended, bite size bits of information. And what I try to do is just maybe buy one new produce item every 10 days. I don't want to buy one every day. I don't want to try something new every day. It's overwhelming. So, but I know that for me, I can do something new every 10 days nutritionally.
Yeah.
So, could you try this once every 2 weeks or once a month?
Yeah, and I would say do the same thing with like removing and replacing things, because you would absolutely fail if you think that you're going to start today and completely overhaul everything in your
Right.
home and in your diet.
Right. It's
That's
so
not
true. It's
realistic.
not realistic. And you're just setting
And it
yourself
sounds
up for
terrible.
failure. Right.
Exactly.
Right.
So when you are trying to implement something, every 10 days, also try to replace something. And so if,
Mm.
your kids are drinking energy drinks, I this is maybe like crazy strict health practitioners would poo-poo me for this. Let your kid just have coffee. And I don't mean a frappuccino, but
Right.
if they want an energy drink for energy in the morning, pour them a cup of coffee
Okay.
and put a little healthy creamer in there, like some raw cream, maybe a little bit of maple syrup. It is far better. And now this isn't if your kid has cancer,
Right.
but when we talk about creating an environment cancer can't survive in, we can't let our kids drink crap like
We
that. And
really
so just
can't. We can't.
go back to what we used to do,
Yeah.
right? Just drink a little coffee with some cream and a little honey. But I love the idea of replacing. So do it, get something new each 10 days and replace something that you think might be or you've learned is toxic.
Hmm. Love that. Okay. Can you share a couple more of your favorite detox foods or drinks?
Yes. Yeah. So a couple that I really like, especially when a child's going through radiation.
Mm.
And this, of course, would be everything we're sharing, to your point, is applicable for adults as
Right.
well. But my specialty and my training and who I work with is peds. So I am a big fan of chlorella and chlorophyll.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really protective against radiation. And so chlorella, chlorophyll, and microalgae, which some people say that they're all kind of the same thing. But if you can mix these into a smoothie,
Hmm.
it would be so, again, chemoprotective and detoxifying. It's
Huh.
incredible for protecting against radiation damage specifically.
Hmm.
Heavy metals, it can help just
Oh,
detox heavy metals, but doing it gently. I'm not a big fan of doing heavy detox while going through
I'll
treatment.
bet. Yes.
It's like pushing a brick up a hill and,
Yeah.
it's just you're kind of chasing your tail. So we wait until after treatment to do that.
Hmm.
But during treatment, we can do things to gently eliminate. And we're using foods.
Right.
Chlorella, chlorophyll, microalgae, these are all foods.
Okay. So
So
these are not are these in a supplement form or
you can,
okay.
yes, you can put them in a supplement form,
Hmm.
but I actually recommend, and our families we work with will make specific supplement recommendations based on their child. But I'm a big fan of if you can source it as a food, do. And there's a company in the US called Terrasoul Foods. Are you
I'm
familiar with
not.
Terrasoul?
No.
So I have a friend, and we're always thankful for these kinds of friends. She is even more crazy than I am when it comes to like being strict about what you eat.
Love it.
And she calls companies and requires them to produce their testing to make sure there's no contaminants or heavy metals. She does this with chocolate, with skincare, with
Love it.
so she did this with Parasol Foods, and they do dried fruits, they do powders,
Hmm.
every powder you can imagine they produce.
Okay.
And they have a great selection of powders.
Oh.
So whether it be chlorophyll, chlorella, they have camu, which is a vitamin C powder
Mhm.
that's also detoxifying and
Okay. I've
chemoprotective.
heard of it. Yep.
And then just adding these to a smoothie
Oh, that's a
is
great idea.
really great.
So I'd love I'll tag that in the show notes, but I'll get that
Yeah,
information from you. Yeah.
yeah. Terrasol is a great company. I mean, I'm unfortunate in Mexico we can't get them. So when I come to the States, I stock up on all my things and I smuggle them across the border.
I love that.
I'm always by security every time we come into
Oh,
Mexico. They look at me like,
like who's this crazy lady bringing all these supplements back?
exactly. Exactly.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So I think just maybe kind of a final question for you. Actually, I might have two. One, how do you do the work you do every day and manage your stress?
Mm, it's the Lord. Like
Yeah.
you know what I've learned is just before our call, On Thursdays in our Thrive Through Cancer Formula program, we have a call. It's called Cocking Connections. It's just for our members. And we put all protocols aside,
Mhm.
all health stuff aside, and we just share our hearts. They share their hurts. They talk about their marriage in the midst of a diagnosis like this. They talk about the other siblings. And every week I cry.
I'll bet.
And I've learned to just be okay with it. Like I think for a while I felt like I needed to be the strong leader.
Yeah.
And I cry with them. And I think I told you in the beginning, and my heart breaks every time. And I used to pray that God would like make me stronger
Mhm.
and just kind of almost, what's the word when you just create this like immunity to it?
Yeah.
Because I was so tired of my heart breaking all the time. And I finally he didn't change it. And I'm like, okay, Lord, I'm releasing this to you. And maybe this is me being able to just really be even more supportive. So I think like God has just given me this ability, and it is so rewarding. I always say pediatric cancer industry is not one for like, it's not the lucrative source of income,
Right.
but it is the most incredible opportunity to give families hope. And to know, like I walked through this, we walked through this years ago,
Right.
and to turn that into something that is just meeting families and giving them hope it truly is an honor. Like I do feel like what an honor that God chose me to be that person with families. And it doesn't mean I don't have stress, and of course, and
Right.
sometimes it's hard to fall asleep because I hear of a new family that's 2-month old was just diagnosed, and and we lose kids. I mean, it's the reality of this disease and of this broken world, right?
Right. Right.
But I know at the end of the day, I can say that families have hope
Yeah.
and their kids have an improved quality of life.
Right. Right. God's really made you resilient for this
Yeah.
season of your life. And you have to be. You have to
Yeah.
be. But I love that you don't have kind of a tough veneer on you. Like
Yeah.
I can see you just really leading with your heart. And as you said, you cry every Thursday with your
Yeah.
families, and that's also a blessing to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah. I just
Yeah.
yeah.
That's the goal, is that they feel just blessed to be and in community. That's one thing that we've learned. You heal in community. You need community
Do.
when you're going through something like this. You can't do it by yourself.
You can't. And I had such a community around me during my cancer journey, and people bringing me flowers and food, but it was also up to me to say yes to those things, because
Yeah.
I'm one of those people that I just didn't want to ask for help. Like like I could do this, or I could whatever, put, as my husband says, head down, horns up, I can get like that. And I would say cancer really softened me,
Yeah.
and that's been a really good change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes you realize you're not indestructible. Like, and I always say I would never wish this on anybody,
Yeah.
not even my worst enemy, but I absolutely wish the perspective.
Yeah.
I wish that and that you can't get perspective without going through it. But I wish
Yeah.
there was a way.
I wish there was a way too, but cancer gave me the opportunity to change for the better. And it took me a bit, but I decided to change for the better.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a perspective I just never thought I'd have. When you hear the C word, it's a club I've heard people say it's a club you never want to be in.
Yeah.
But it's a community of people who are just so beautiful.
hmm
And I really needed them and need them still.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Once you've been diagnosed, it doesn't, I work with parents. We're actually creating a remission program
Oh,
once they're done with treatment to support them through that. And one of the things, and you know this real well, once it's happened once, it doesn't ever go away in the sense of your mind. And there's always this lingering fear that we have to pray against,
yep.
right? And so just being able to have that perspective of the fragility of life, but also you can't be passive.
Yeah. You can't be passive.
This has happened before. How can we keep it from happening again? And it's really important to be active in that role.
It really is, and I don't let my guard down when it comes to taking care of myself. I mean, every now and then I do, and I don't get enough sleep, or I'm eating junk, or I might have a glass of Chardonnay, whatever it is. But for the most part, I'm really vigilant because I just don't wanna go through that again, and I just had
Yeah.
my scans, like, 2 weeks ago, and I'll tell you, I just wasn't prayed up enough, and my husband
Mm.
even said, "I wanna go with you," and I was like, "Ah, this is my 3rd one, I'm fine." And I got there, and I put the robe on, and I lost it. I
Yeah.
lost it for, like, 2 hours of sobbing. I feel
Mm.
so sorry for the gal doing the ultrasound. I mean, like, she could hardly even do the ultrasound of my breast because I'm, like, shaking so hard. And I just thought, "Okay, this is a good lesson for me that I can still ask for help 2 and a
Yeah.
half years post. I can still ask for
Yeah.
help. Like, that season doesn't have to be over of me asking for help." And so, next time my husband's going with me and having my
Yeah.
girlfriends pray for me. So, yeah,
Absolutely. So true.
yeah,
That's so true.
yeah. So, what is one, and I'm gonna say simple because I don't I'm a little teary, so excuse me for a second. Never apologize for tears either,
No.
especially when I'm talking to somebody about cancer. But what's one simple thing somebody can do today? And the person I'm thinking of is somebody who lives in a high rise in a really busy city. They are inundated with EMFs and they don't have maybe access to, like, I can walk out my door and be on grass in 2 seconds. So what do we tell those parents? How do they
Yeah.
protect their kids?
That's a great question. So, just a couple things that I would say. It's about doing the best you can with what you
Yeah.
have, right? And so right away, I would unplug the Wi-Fi. And if you have any smart devices in your home, if you're a smart home, meaning it's all connected to Bluetooth and you've got Siri talking to you and you've got Alexa and you've got the refrigerator communicating to your phone, and disconnect that.
Oh, I love
That's
that.
just a total nervous system disrupt, and that's free. You
It's
might have to pay somebody to come in and I don't know, but it's an inexpensive but powerful shift.
oh,
And I have parents say, "Well, Susan, but when I pull up my Wi-Fi, even though mine's off, it like shows 75 because I'm in a building."
mm,
It doesn't matter. You do the best you can with what you have, and you are reducing exposure,
love that.
right?
Yep.
That would be the first thing. And the second thing I would say, and this is also free, is practicing fasting.
Mm.
Now, this is a little bit more challenging with kids. However, kids are, again, they're inherently in tune with their body because they're younger. And I always say they were with Jesus more recently. So they have this special intelligence, right?
That's good. I love
They're a
that.
little smarter. We as parents, we panic when our kids get hungry.
Mhm.
We force them to eat breakfast right when they wake up.
Yep.
I would encourage you to allow your child to tell you when they're hungry. Now, please understand take this with a grain of salt. If your child is losing weight rapidly and they're in a state of critical condition, then this is different. But if you are either creating an environment cancer can't survive in, you're being proactive, or if your child is in active treatment, you can allow them. It's okay when they're not hungry.
Mm.
You can allow them to wake up and give them water, let their body just reset and digest. Fasting is nature's operating
Mm.
table. And again, there are plenty of studies that show a certain period of time of fasting, actually your body will start to kill cancer cells on its own without doing anything, without taking 100 supplements.
Mm.
It'll start to kill cancer cells. So we're big proponents of fasting. But again, with kids, like this is advice that you need to work with a practitioner
Definitely.
to advise you.
Mhm.
But it's free,
Yeah.
it's simple, and your kid will absolutely lose weight during treatment, and that's okay.
Mhm.
Doctors tell you, "Oh my gosh, we can't have them lose a pound." And they can. They're actually losing oftentimes the inflammation.
Hmm.
And yes, we need to pay attention to stable weight, and every child is different. What's a normal, healthy weight for them? But it is okay if they lose a little bit of weight during treatment. It becomes dangerous when, of course, if they become cachectic, and we can prevent that with fasting, with nutrition that we've already talked about. All
Right.
of the things we've shared already can help protect against that. But fasting and reducing the EMF exposure in your home are two really, really powerful and simple and free things that you can do.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about that fasting conversation, but yeah, I like what you said. Did you say fasting is nature's operating table?
Yeah, it truly is. Like this is, but when our ancestors were, before we had the agricultural era and industrial revolution, they would eat when they had food and they would go days between eating. And did we have cancer then? Hardly,
Mm,
right?
mhm.
So we didn't have modern diseases when we actually were eating off the land and fasting.
Right.
I think we're so used to getting fed when we want that we have this thing called ghrelin that roars in your belly. It's the grumbling that you
Mhm.
hear, the growling. And that's actually typically out of just habit based on when you eat. And when you can learn to kind of work past that an hour or two, your body does amazing things. And there's studies around autophagy, which is when basically destruction of unhealthy cells that happens at 17 to 18 hours of fasting. And that's not that much. That's like stopping eating at 7 p.m. and resuming again at noon
Right.
or 1. It's actually not that long. It
Right.
just takes time to wake up to.
That is so interesting. I thank you for defining that. That's a really interesting distinction to make about, because when you think about fasting, I think about, oh, somebody went 3 days without eating.
No,
That's definitely not what you're talking about. You're talking about
no,
like a window
it,
of time.
absolute intermittent
Intermittent
fasting, I should say.
fasting. Okay,
Yeah.
fascinating.
And there's even studies that show fasting for as little as, I want to say 8 hours showed a reduction in chance of developing breast cancer. So it's a really fascinating,
Wow.
time old, like this has been around since we were here,
Mhm.
but just a really powerful mechanism of healing that the body knows what to do because we were created to be able to do it.
And it's interesting. Yes, I'm a nutritionist, but I know a lot of this. But, 5 years ago, I was eating up until I practically was brushing my teeth to go into bed. And I have
Yeah.
since learned that really impacted my health. And
Yeah.
I started to have GERD, gastroesophageal reflux
Yeah.
disease. I couldn't sleep. I had to sleep on a huge wedge because I was literally, honestly, season eating all the way up until like 11 o'clock. Crazy.
Yeah.
But it was a
Yep.
habit I had to break. And now I don't eat anything past probably 2 hours before bed. And most of the time, 3 hours before bed. And I sleep so much better and I don't have GERD anymore. So again,
Yep.
you're talking about some habits that I think what you're saying is just take a look at some of maybe your food habits and do your own research.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it is changing habits and do them one at a time. You don't have to change them all at
You
once.
sure don't. Pick one a month, if
Yes.
that's a good way to go for you. So, oh, Susan Johnson, phenomenal information. I'll tag all your information in the show notes. And I just want to take a deeper dive on more of the work that you're doing. And you're really doing great work. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And yes, it's an honor. Thanks for having me. I love when I have the opportunity to share the message and educate and empower people to just create an environment that cancer can't survive in.
I love that. We all need that these days.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, y'all, can you do me a favor today and go and leave a review of this podcast? I know that the more great reviews, wink, wink, emphasis on great, reviews that I get, along with more downloads and more subscribers, that pushes this podcast out to people who might normally not even find it. And the reason I started this podcast and my real heart for starting this podcast is that I needed this information. It wasn't available. And so I started a podcast so that I could be a blessing to others. So you're a blessing to me just by being here. And again, thank you for your support. Thank you for your positive reviews and all of the notes that you send me. And also just wanted to say, hey, keep in mind, I'm not a doctor. And if you need medical advice, please reach out to your team. That is going to be just the best source for you because they know you. So again, I hope you enjoy this podcast.